So that whole kind of stack that was all siloed behind expertise and costs, that used to be millions of dollars to build networks, and that's no exaggeration, now is a few thousand. And that's a huge disruption to the space. It really now, like I said, if you're an enterprise company, if you're a farmer, you can take a few $1,000s and some off-the-shelf hardware, Althea firmware, that machine-to-machine billing and routing, and take sovereignty back of your data and choice and leverage that to build resilient infrastructure.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Wagby Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with another Wagby Ventures podcast. I'm joined today by Deborah. She's the CEO, co-founder of Althea System, a visionary in decentralized internet infrastructure, leveraging blockchain and innovative routing protocols to empower communities with affordable, locally run broadband networks. For anyone who is new, this is the Wagby Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, and investors across crypto and AI. Check out wagmyventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. All right, guys, let's get into it. I'm excited. Let's welcome to the show, Deb. Hey, Deb.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you on. I'm going to get right into it here. And you've mentioned, whether it's on talks or shows or podcasts, this personal radium the blood feeling. I thought it was really interesting. And I figured I'd start my questions there around, like, maybe you can share from that feeling if there was a particular moment in your career that ignited the passion to crypto and to build Althea.
Yeah, that's a great question. That feeling comes out of being a third generation ham radio operator and being ingrained with this idea of sovereignty and resiliency is everyone's responsibility, and that we can create and manage infrastructure in ways that we have choice and leverage. So it really, early Bitcoin miner with the milk crates and all of that, and also aligned with a lot of work we were doing in empowering local communities to build network architecture. And actually, we started Althea in the town that I live in, a small town in Oregon, who had been trying to solve a lot of their connectivity problems for many years. And really, that's when it became evident that it wasn't a grant problem. Of course, this community received millions and millions of dollars of repeated grants, didn't solve the problem. And that's where we really understood it was a systemic issue. And that's what blockchain does best, actually, is create incentive alignment at a systemic level and allow us all of the kind of flexibility of payments and the resiliency needed with the decentralized system. It was exciting to see it grow and take hold in our community, and also in communities like Ulahaktak up in the Arctic Circle that have built private cellular up there. And I think as it evolved, another marker that we were on the right track was in the enterprise world. So that same sovereignty and resiliency is needed by companies who are looking to leverage this technology too. Companies that are maybe paying billions of dollars in connectivity costs for increasing amount of telemetry updates and things like that they need to do, can now take this infrastructure, build their own cellular stacks, their own 5G networks, and take back control of their data, whether that's a farmer or a community or an enterprise. And in this case, this was a manufacturing company looking to offload some of their data and keep that sovereign within their own stacks. Along the way, it's really been exciting to actually physically see these systems perform and provide that needed sovereignty and resiliency.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting and pretty cool as well. I love you just hone in on sovereignty, and Althea's pretty much become a movement to remake telecom infrastructure with this sovereignty theme or undertone, if you will. What's one legacy telecom practice you think is the most ripe for disruption, and how does Althea's technology tackle this?
There's a lot of different pieces of it, to be honest. But what I really want to share is the journey in the 3GPP stack. And that's your 4G, 5G. It's the fourth generation of 3GPP. And what that came out of, those are basically the standards that mobile network operators came together to put together that they were all going to agree on. But it became a very siloed and monopolistic thing. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, you had Ma Bell. And of course, the telecoms across the world are architected very monopolistically. And that makes sovereignty, resiliency very difficult. But there's been the work that, of course, Althea has done and the industry as a whole to create things like what we call our key LTE 5G, which is a lightweight core. It's like technology that allows you to basically run the thinking parts of the system like on a home router, which is something that's never been done before. That's what we did, and create the SIM orchestration between public and private. And so now anyone can run a 5G network and create all the different interoperable billing stacks with Althea's machine-to-machine payments with a few $1,000 and readily available off-the-shelf hardware. And that just wasn't possible before it. And to see even that, we started working back in 2018 with University of Washington on some of the early private cellular networks and have evolved that along the way. Now bringing in spectrum that's tokenized on the blockchain, so you can actually get that licensed RF spectrum and have that be much more flexible. So that whole kind of stack that was all siloed behind expertise and costs, it used to be millions of dollars to build networks, and that's no exaggeration, now is a few thousand. And that's a huge disruption to the space. It really now, like I said, if you're an enterprise company, if you're a farmer, you can take a few $1,000 and some off-the-shelf hardware, Althea firmware, that machine-to-machine billing and routing, and take sovereignty back of your data and choice and leverage that to build resilient infrastructure and for yourself or your community.
No, and that's the beauty of what you're building here, the many communities that you've continued to impact in that regard. I think one of the other things that, as you start to think of financial inclusion that comes up, is payments. And Althea has really done a great job of integrating payments into the blockchain and the routing of it. It's complex, but it's innovative, pretty valuable to obviously the end users. And how do you carry them along? Like, how do you educate them about this disruption that you're bringing to them, that you're delivering to them without losing them in all the tech and the jargon?
That's a great question. And I think there's two answers that I want to share with the audience here. The first is just like TCP/IP and the complexity of routing in the normal internet, most of that probably shouldn't be educated. That can be all under the hood, right? In order to use Chrome and internet browsers, you don't have to educate people on, how routing packets and pings and things work. So similarly for Althea, we use traditional interfaces to load like something like Stripe to onboard to USDC. And then the machines use peer-to-peer microtransactional payments, and all the bridging happens seamlessly under the hood there. So for most users, they have still all of those flexibility, the choice, and the leverage that blockchain provides, but it's all something that's very easy to interact with. In fact, one of the really innovative parts of Althea is it's latency specific, meaning that users can choose their choice of cost or performance, like latency, on basically a minute by minute basis. And how we share that with users is with a slider bar. So it's very easy. One side's cost, one side's performance. You move your slider bar from one side or the other as you'd like, and then it routes your packets through the network and then pays those microtransactions appropriately as you have suggested to either prefer cost or performance. And that's been pretty exciting to see people using those tools that they have and then allowing the machines to do the work under the hood. Yeah, so I think that's one really exciting aspect. The other piece that's interesting here is that all of the Althea devices have embedded wallets. So there's nothing custodial about this. These USDC, the stablecoins under the hood, belong to the user. And we can do that to a very small embedded degree, like Raspberry Pis and even smaller embedded devices can have these sovereign wallets. And I do think we take for granted that people realize that having your own, holding your own money is a good thing. So we've gone from all across the world. This has been rolled out in 4 different countries, all across the US. And we do find that does resonate without a lot of education why having your money in your wallet is a good thing.
No, absolutely. And it also helps, like when the user is fully abstracted from all the magic that happens in the tech world under the hood. No, thank you for unpacking that. Hey, everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show. I think I'll just switch gears here and start to think about interoperability, right? We're talking blockchain, we're talking telecom, two very different industries. Blockchain very much disrupting a lot of what traditionally has been telecom space. And your work with Gravity Bridge and Cosmos definitely highlights your commitment to interoperability. How do you see this play out and evolve? And how is Althea managing this convergence?
This is an interesting question. And I think we're at an interesting point right now, too, where a lot of the blockchain technology has really evolved to the point where this is starting to become like almost a standards issue, what we talked about with 3GPP. And I think we're already starting to see, of course, lots of bridges and interoperability standards are starting to form, APIs and things like that, where we're thinking about how all of these are interoperable. One thing that also comes to mind too is an interesting convergence of how like telecom thinks about incentives and rewards and how blockchain does. So the way that there are many of these, like what they call DPIN projects, where someone a consumer does an activity and they get rewarded for it in these blockchain points. That's very similar to how you would go to a hotel or an airline. And I think many of the telcos are thinking about that too. Like, how do we reward our consumers and users in different ways? But the key with blockchain is that then it does become interoperable. And then you could have an AT&T bucks or even a local currency could have their own rewards. Hey, you're shopping locally, here's our own token. And the way that we are managing, that from a utilities perspective is that we created the IFI DEX, or infrastructure finance, which is loosely defines how we think about utilities and infrastructure and blockchain working together. But this IFI DEX seamlessly allows machines and utilities to spin up their own types of rewards that then swap between USDC, USDT, or other stables, or you can bring in yield-bearing stables and all these different kind of things and levers that we have in decentralized finance. Now your community, your enterprise, your municipality can use these kind of rewards to interoperate with them. And then, of course, that can go out to the greater the blockchain ecosystem.
Yeah. Thank you for unpacking that. I think that's one of the things that, as the crypto industry continues to evolve, that continues to crop up is the issue having so many systems that don't talk to each other. And I'm seeing that you guys are on the front footing of that is pretty encouraging. Just going back again to your thoughts earlier around sovereignty and community ownership and the digital equity that comes with that, have you faced resistance from some of these telecoms or reg bodies or ISPs as you've navigated in the build out and rollout of Althea?
It's an interesting question. I think where telecoms are at right now, I think famously we hear about the story of the people that go into Kodak and talk about a digital camera, and Kodak really just can't quite get their head around it. I don't want to say that we've had much resistance in terms of how telecom views this yet. I think traditionally, the way that telco manages this is they invest heavily into these with private equity, and then they acquire and either own that technology or bury it. What I think is so powerful about the resiliency of blockchain is that is not possible. And I'm not sure that a large monopoly can really understand exactly how they would even come about that. So there's a lot of audacity, I think, in how blockchain brings together a global participation of many different operators and diversity. And that resilience plays not only into how we think about local infrastructure, but how we think about really bringing about real disruption, because so many innovative and really disruptive startups end up going the startup route, which is venture or private equity and then being acquired. But that doesn't mean that the idea, that disruption lives on past that point. So I think there is this real power in the collaborative effort and the innovation that will last and prevail in bringing real solutions. But I think even along the way, we've seen, you mentioned of Gravity Bridge, which is an open source project. It brought down the cost of bridging in a meaningful way. It's been forked many different times and used in lots of different blockchains. And that piece of technology then was able to disrupt the bridging space in general and then essentially be much better for the consumer. So I think we're really excited to continue the innovation and disruptive fight with all of our many operators, validators, and participants in the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it definitely sounds like you are getting support and true partnership from a number of the regulators that you're rolling out in each of these regions across the world.
Yeah, and we've been fortunate in Hawk Networks, the company that incubated a lot of the Althea technology, recently signed a partnership with Globalstar, for example. And Globalstar has a very innovative approach to how they look at the RF spectrum and private cellular and so forth. And so there's a lot of players in the ecosystem that are acknowledging the machine economy is coming. Like the status quo isn't going to continue to work. And so we've been fortunate enough to find even large companies, multi-billion-dollar companies like Globalstar, who are on that forefront, that recognize that innovation is coming and are working collaboratively with us on that.
Awesome. As you think of like the crypto community and debates around layer 1 versus layer 2 solutions and your tech stack, is there any thoughts around or preference around either, or how do you balance using layer 1 versus layer 2 as you think about scaling in decentralization with Althea's networks design?
It's a bit of a story time episode here. So let me take you back to 2017. And we used Ethereum actually as our very first protocol directly for making the payments and all of the sort of friction points around that and the gas. And then it was CryptoKitties, and then the whole chain got bogged. So there's a bit of history there. Yep. And so then we then started building on Gnosis chain, which is very low gas for their stable DAI. And this whole kind of process is very similar to like how Althea has continued to develop and find product market fit together with our users. So instead of the kind of typical blockchain playbook where you throw up a blockchain and then you try to figure out what you're doing afterwards, we put on our boots and got dirty in each of the neighborhoods that we went to and on each of the enterprises and companies that we worked with, and then developed the solutions along in a very iterative way. And I think it's made Althea very robust. And so we've been on the Gnosis chain as one of the leading applications. In fact, I think around 2021, we were 72% of all the traffic on Gnosis chain. And there's limitations. It's not instant finality. There's not a lot of ability to control the block size, and it's not sovereign for us as well. So after launching the Gravity Bridge, which allowed us to have a decentralized way to bridge, in 2021, we started working on our own L1, which is a hybrid EVM on the Cosmos SDK, similar to Story or Berachain in architecture. And this hybrid EVM, we launched Althea L1 in late last year. The operators and validators did a decentralized start for that chain. But what that really gives us is two main things. When you're doing microtransactions, you need instant finality. You can't go into a grocery store, buy 50-cent candy bar, and then walk out and then have a reorg. Over time, that doesn't scale well. And then the other main thing is the ability to prioritize those utility type transactions over some of the DeFi that's happening on the EVM side. And the kind of final component that we've just put together is that IFI DEX I mentioned earlier. So then there's a whole kind of ecosystem there that allows for utilities, telecom to interact with the chain in really flexible ways. And right now we're in the IFI DEX testnet and looking to unlock and allow more trading of the token upon governance. So the community will decide when that happens.
That's a great story. I think we'd love to always hear how you evolve from different pieces that come together to create Althea. Althea's blockchain-based payment system dynamic adjusts based on bandwidth usage, which I think is pretty innovative. What are the other innovative use cases you've seen emerge from this decentralized payment model?
I'll try to keep concise, but it is really quite interesting. Once you bring things on chain, a number of really different interesting things starts to happen. And I think one of the ones I want to highlight is the RWA product we call liquid infrastructure. Along the way, we realized that telecom networks are capital intensive. You're building radio towers, glass in the ground, fiber optic. It's expensive to build, but their legacy, they'll last 30, 40, 50 years, and they create resilient infrastructure for that community. So once you have those streaming payments that are happening on chain, it makes sense that you could actually tokenize those assets themselves and their revenue and distribute. So then we fractionalize that and then distribute it pro rata to the different participants in that piece of infrastructure itself. And that's all done on chain in a transparent way. So it mitigates the risk of like investing in a company and then waiting for a year and then going through all their financials and then hoping they're paying you at the end. And this way, you're just actually taking top line revenue distributed to the different participants in the network, whether that's service providers maintaining the network or capital providers or other participants in the network. And that's really unlocked a lot of really exciting possibilities into kind of traditionally illiquid types of assets. In fact, I think there's like roughly 2 trillion in the top booked assets in the top 30 telecoms in the world, just sitting there. All of this that's more or less illiquid, and financing for telecom can be bespoke. So this really, and it let us think about how we can do this in other types of utilities as well. Certainly we haven't, as the chain and ecosystem evolves, I'm sure we'll see things like energy or even water potentially being able to be utilized by communities to build and participate in their own infrastructure. And then they can also have the easier ways for capital to meet the builders who are building that. But all sorts of things too. Things like registries on chain. I don't know if y'all remember TCRs, token curated registries back in the day, but we have a registry of PLMNs or different types of cellular providers can register they're providing on chain too. So it's really exciting. Once you bring those core primitives of streaming revenue on chain and these microtransactions with the EVM kind of DeFi environment, it gets really fun.
Oh yeah, I hear you loud and clear on that one. But the other angle that I was just thinking about is like for crypto and decentralization and users, like how does Althea simplify the user experience for paying for internet with crypto? And if you can share any lessons learned, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried a lot of different methods. We use like Stripe's one of the onboarding that we use with a simple dashboard that people log into. They can see how much bandwidth they've used. And all of our system is prepaid internet, which was very new in the West. So other countries use prepaid broadband, but in like the US, I don't think in Europe either. But in the US, it was a pretty new concept. And at first we got a lot of people said that nobody will like that. It's going to be difficult, but people love that flexibility, and it's really allowed us to onboard a lot more, or other operators to onboard a lot of the market share that wasn't there before. Roughly 1 in 4 people in the US don't have access to broadband. And a lot of that is just because the payments are inflexible. So that's been pretty exciting, but really just making it very easy for people to either like scan a QR code or just go to a simple dashboard has really been a big piece of that. And then we have an easy way for people to back up their private keys and so forth. But again, these are mostly more or less kind of hot wallets, right? So they don't keep a lot of money on them. But yeah, so it's been a great process along the way. One of the things that also has been an interesting thing as we've worked with communities that are maybe experiencing poverty or struggling to get access for different reasons is that still there's a lot of cash based in the US. And I would say that's one of the challenges we haven't quite figured out yet. But the US surprisingly has a large cash based economy, which I'm excited about, like potentially this being a way to onboard people to a more, we'll just skip over the credit cards and everything else and actually just go right from cash to digital economy using the blockchain. And I think that's an exciting opportunity that I'm looking forward to exploring.
Yeah, and I think it's also going to be exciting when it gets rolled out, because it's just one area that continues to address financial inclusion at the very base layer, if you will, in many of these communities that you're already represented in building. And my last question for you here is, like, outside of all of this, what else in crypto excites you?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. Like I said, I've been in blockchain a really long time and I've seen lots of different cycles. But what I do think is interesting now is with the advancement of like RWAs and infrastructure, we are really bringing that all the benefits of transparency on chain and allowing more people to participate in that. So I think that's a really positive progression in the industry, is that kind of some of the old playbooks have kind of exhausted themselves. And in general, a lot of the interest in movement is in this more that intersection of whether it's government and supply chains, or it's these RWAs looking at how we can leverage that yield or streaming revenue on chain. I think it's really, really interesting. And we're finally getting to that standardization. I hope that now, because we're kind of at that inflection point, that we start to see the emergence of standardization bodies within the industry. I think this is a perfect time for us all to come together to really look at how we want to see the industry evolve from here. And I'm excited about the future.
Awesome. That's fantastic. We're all going to be looking forward to hearing more and bigger things going on with Althea, and how you continue to roll out the project in many communities that are definitely in desperate need of the technology. And of course, we will continue to be cheerleaders of the tech, and more especially of you and your vision.
Appreciate the opportunity to share, and thank you for the listeners.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much, and have a good one.